Welcome to Blooming Wildwood Homestead. It is May 1st and it finally is starting to feel like spring around here. That makes me super excited because I am anxious to really be out in the garden in full force. This time of year can bring on a few different challenges just because we can kind of get tricked by one or two nice days, and sometimes it's easy to plant some items in your garden that maybe the temperature isn't quite conducive for. We're going to talk a little bit today about the difference between air temperature and soil temperature. One of the things that happens is sometimes when we get a really nice day, it's maybe in the 70s, we're feeling like it's warm and we want to get our garden in, we forget that the soil temperature really isn't that warm. It takes a few warm days to get a consistently warm temperature that's going to help some of your summer crops to germinate. Some crops such as tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, melons, those kinds of things are going to require a warmer soil temperature in order to germinate. That's why here in the Pacific Northwest, it really is imperative that we get some of those things started in the house so that we can have that extended growing season. If I were to plant out the seeds directly into the ground when it's time, when the soil is ready for those seeds to be planted, it's going to be too short of a growing season to be able to harvest off of that plant. That's just the nature of where we live. You're gonna have to kind of play around with this based off of your area. But this time of year, the weather can be really tricky. For example, we just had some snow the first part of April, which is not typically something we would have here. We've also had cooler than normal temperatures. The air temperature really does make a difference, and the number of warm days that we have in a row really impacts the warmth of the soil. To germinate some of those plants, it might take 5 days to 10 days or 2 weeks. And you need that soil temperature to be in the ideal range for the majority of that time. So if you have one warm day and then it goes back to being cooler, which is what it tends to do around here this time of year, we might have one day like today where it was in the mid 60s, and then tomorrow it might be low 50s. That's not going to warm the soil enough and keep it warm enough to germinate some of those plants. And you just want to be mindful of that before you go to plant things out. You also want to take a look at how much rain you're going to be having and whether or not the seeds that you're planting out are going to be able to germinate and grow, or whether or not they might kind of get washed out or drowned from too much rain. So these are just all factors that you want to take into consideration. But today we're really going to focus on soil temperature. Our daytime temps have been running kind of mid 40s, low 50s. Just this past week we've ended up more of the mid 50 range, but that's really where we've been as far as our daytime temperatures go. And nighttime temperatures, we still have had a few nights where we've been in the 30s, even had a slight frost, almost chance of a frost last week. With that in mind, just because today was in the mid 60s, that doesn't mean that the soil temperature is consistently in the mid 60s. Let's take a look and see just how warm it is. I've placed the thermometer in the soil and we are looking at about 64 degrees Fahrenheit. That actually is warmer than I was expecting, but it was a warm day today, so I think that has made a difference. I would want a few more warm days before deciding to plant something that requires warmth for germination directly into the ground. You can set up some artificial conditions that are going to impact the soil temperature, and that can kind of help to raise the soil temperature so that you can start growing some things earlier. One of the ways you can do that is by having a greenhouse or a high tunnel, and that can impact your soil temperature. Here in the high tunnel, it is currently at about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really not too bad considering I think it got up to about 74 in here today. It didn't get super warm, but just the fact that it's 68 is pretty good. If I were to plant some items in here that require warmer temperatures to germinate, I would definitely want to make sure that I have more of a consistent warmth so that they will germinate. Now, I know the soil temperature has finally started to rise in here because of a little experiment that I have been conducting. You know that I like to conduct experiments. We don't have the ends closed in on this tunnel, and so I thought, well, let's see if it might be warm enough to go ahead and plant some zucchini or some cucumbers in here, and let's see if they come up. You can see that the yellow squash and the cucumbers are not coming up at all. And the zucchini is just starting to make an appearance. I planted these probably about 2 weeks ago, and they've just kind of been sitting here doing nothing. And the cucumbers or the zucchini rather, are just now coming up, which is very interesting and tells me that the soil temperature has risen enough. But without the ends on here, we just haven't had warm enough days to get that soil temperature consistently warm enough to germinate those brand new plants before now. So we know that the temperature of the soil really warmed up yesterday with warmer air temperature. But last night it was about 44 degrees. So let's take a look at what our morning soil temperature looks like. Our morning soil temperature is about 50 degrees. This is the same location that was at 64 yesterday. Back here in the high tunnel, we're taking a look. Now remember, the ends are not on this high tunnel, and so that is going to impact our temperature. But it is undercover, so we don't have the cold rain ending up on the soil in here. So we're gonna see how that affects things. Our current soil temperature in the high hat is 53 degrees. So there's a lot to learn here from both of these things. Interestingly, even though the air temperature is still cool in the high tunnel, I'm obviously retaining enough warmth in here that the ground is still warmer than it is outside. So we've got a lot of warm days coming up, and I think that we're to the point now where I can transplant some of the warmer weather items that I've already worked on hardening off into the ground here in the high tunnel, and they'll be fine. I'm not ready yet to transplant even warmer weather items out into the regular garden yet, just because of where we're at. Now, if we have that week coming up where the temperatures are dramatically different, things might change by the end of next week, and it might be time to start planting things out. But you really do have to watch the weather. I know weather is not always predictable, and we're not always accurate in our predictions, and that can make a difference and make it hard to decide what's going to be the best option. But my main point here is to not be fooled by one really nice day and think everything is warm enough that you can plant everything out or start everything from seed in your garden. Do pay attention to trends and patterns over time so that you're not wasting your time or seeds because you planted when the soil temperature was just too low for that particular item. That being said, there are many cool weather crops such as cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. They enjoy this kind of weather. Lettuce, those are great items that are not going to require high temperatures for germination, and they're going to thrive in cooler temperatures. So there's always something that can be planted. Just be aware of your temperatures so that you know what actually would be a good fit. I'm not saying that you have to purchase a soil thermometer in order to make sure that your soil is exactly the temperature that it needs to be for ideal germination. Don't get me wrong on that point. But if you are getting anxious to plant things out directly into the ground and you're not doing some transplanting with some of those items that require warmer temperatures for germination, addition, I would recommend paying attention to your weather patterns. What kind of weather have you previously had in like the last week? What kind of weather is predicted for the week coming up? If today's video was helpful, don't forget to click like, and we would love to have you subscribe and be part of our community here at Blooming Wildwood Homestead. Until next time, bye everyone.